So here we have, for your viewing pleasure, the NECA Godzilla Monster of Monsters Nintendo Godzilla. This is the box. It's based on the old Nintendo video game box. I have the old Nintendo game right here. I don't have the box. I haven't seen the box for this game since probably like 1992, so I have no idea what happened to that, but still got the game. Anyway, I've already taken the figure out of the package, but I'll show you. You've probably already seen reviews on this by now. I gotta confess, I'm a little late to the party for this figure, but in the background there, you see like a card insert. The way they did with like the Batman video game figure and a lot of the other ones in that kind of style is they insert like pictures from the actual video game level itself. So that way when you get the figure in front of it, it's like a mock-up of how the figure, aka the video game character, looked in his environment. And then here's like a map screen for Godzilla. On the top, I don't know if you can see, it's got his power and life gauge. So, cool box. I'm going to keep it. I like all this kind of stuff. Let's get a look at the figure. So here's the figure itself. Out of the box, and painted up to look like the video game sprite. So that's why you got like little pixelated details and stuff like that. And that's why you get the color you get. Because in the game, Godzilla was kind of like a, almost like a teal blue color. I don't know why they used that for his color palette, but whatever, that's just how it looks. So NECA did a good job replicating that. They got little highlights on the back of the fins and like a little bit in the body too, with like a much lighter blue color. And then the shading area is done mostly in a gray. Zooming in a little bit, you'll be able to see that they painted the inside of the mouth like a regular flesh tone color. Oh, I should say like just a regular like red for the tongue. I think that's pretty cool. It doesn't take away anything from the figure. You can't really see the inside of his mouth in the video game, so it's not like you would have much idea of what an accurate color would be. That said, if they had decided to go for the light blue, it wouldn't have bothered me either. And the eyes are red on the figure, which in the video game they're not. They're just blue pixels, but it doesn't bother me. I think it's a cool little creative liberty that they took, and it kind of stands out. It's a nice contrast against the rest of the figure. The jaw hinges shut, too, as well. I think this is the same head that they used on their 1985 figure, which I didn't get that one because I wasn't too impressed with it. Something about the proportions and I don't know, there's just something a little off about it. But when they repurposed it for this, it seemed like it worked a little better because I didn't have quite as strict expectations, I guess. I don't know. Like, if you're going to base a figure on a certain movie, to me it has to be spot on to be that. Like, if they had just released that as a Godzilla figure and that was the one that was out, I probably would have been like, awesome, let's get it. But because they based it on a certain type of Godzilla and it didn't really resemble that to me, I passed on it. That's not to say that repurposing it for this Godzilla was a bad idea because, as I mentioned, I like this figure a lot, so I think they did fine with it. So you can see they went with the giant fins on his back, or the spines, or whatever you want to call them. He did have really big spines in the video game, so that's actually pretty accurate to how he looked. You get really good movement in the arms, like the shoulders. You got a lot of great range of motion on them. The elbows are single jointed, so, I mean, not great movement, but I mean, Godzilla never really had, great movement in the movies or any of that anyway, so it doesn't matter that much. And pretty good wrist movement. I think it's on a ball joint, so you get a little bit decent range out of it. The upper body is on a ball peg inside, and because the spines are soft, you're able to get them to like overlap like that, so you can twist his upper body whichever direction you want and have it not like get in the way of the articulation. The legs on mine are a little tight. It's a little tough to move them. And the knees are the same way. Like, I had to fight with these knees to get the articulation to work before. I'm having a hard time getting it right now, but oh well. If there's one minor nitpick I have about this figure, it's the feet. And I think his feet were a little bit bigger in the video game. Like, just, I don't know if they were longer or whatever the case. But they might have not been able to make the leg bigger and the foot bigger because it might have hindered the articulation. So, I don't know, they might have just gone with that. But either way, that's not a huge problem for me because, obviously I still bought the figure. I knew what it looked like before I bought it, so it was no big deal. The tail has segmented joints in here up until about here, and then from there it's a piece that you put on after you open up the package, and it's a rubber with a bendy wire in there. It's a rubber piece. So, pretty good range of motion on the tail, too. Overall, this guy has pretty solid articulation. I think any pose that you could see Godzilla in a movie, you'll probably be able to mimic it with this figure. So here he is with some other Godzillas. On this side, we have the 2014 movie Godzilla from NECA. You'll see that they're pretty comparable in height. Proportions are way different, but that's just because the proportions of this movie Godzilla were totally different from like previous Toho versions of Godzilla. So obviously you're going to notice differences in that. But That's not to say that either one is more accurate than the other. It's just the way that the Godzillas were portrayed. So both of these are actually really good figures, by the way. And over on this side, we've got the SH Monster Arts Godzilla, the standard one. The first release, not the Rebirth version. But you can see that they scale together pretty well, too. So this Nintendo Godzilla will fit in well, whether you've got other NECA figures or whether you got Monster Arts, or if you're like me and you just have both styles and you don't care who makes them, you just like awesome figures. So there you go. It'll fit in pretty well with anything you got. So overall, do I recommend this figure? I'm going to say yes, but only to fans of the old Nintendo game. If you're a Godzilla fan but you don't care about the video game, then I would say maybe pass on this one and wait until the 1954 figure comes out that NECA's releasing, or they may have already released by the time you see this. That figure looks awesome. However, if you're a child of the 90s like me and you remember this being the only version of Godzilla available to play in video game form, then yeah, I suggest pick it up. And as a bonus, let's go over this video game just for a little bit. I think it kind of gets unfairly lumped in with like other terrible games of the time. It's really not awful. I mean, it's not great. I'm not going to tell you it's as good as Mario 3 or any of the other classic Nintendo games, but it's not terrible. Especially considering as a kid growing up in the early 90s, you didn't have a lot of Godzilla stuff in the United States, so that was about as good as you could expect to get. I was an adult by the time I figured out that Toho had been making movies all through the 90s, and I, got pretty well caught up on all of them now that they're available on DVD and everything, but at the time, I had no idea what was even going on. As far as I knew, Godzilla was a thing from the 70s and the 80s, and that was the end of it. So this isn't terrible. The second Godzilla game, though, for Nintendo, it's just garbage. I had it, I sold it once I figured out that it was a valuable game, and I never looked back because it was terrible. This one, though, I'd recommend giving it a playthrough, see what you think. That said, this game does have its issues. Let's talk about why is Godzilla never in a city? I don't know. I mean, you see several levels where he's just like kicking over mountains and he's in like rocky terrain or like outdoor areas. I guess that's fine. But then there's some levels where he's like on spaceships and I don't even know what else. And the point of the game is to go from planet to planet and fight the new monsters. So I don't know how Godzilla's getting all these other planets, but he gets there somehow. Oh, and every level they just add new monsters, but you still have to fight the old ones you already beat, which is cool because the monster fights are fun, but it begs the question, why do the guys you beat in level 1 on planet Earth follow you all through the entire solar system, all the way to planet X, just to get beat up over and over again? I really don't, whatever. Can we talk about why monsters like Ghidorah, Moguera, Baragon, and Varan are in this, but Rodan is not, and Megalon is not, and neither is Jit-Jaga. He's not in it. I don't get it. So, those are classic Godzilla monsters that could have been lumped into this game, but instead they're taking other monsters that may or may not have even been in a Godzilla movie for any amount of time longer than like 5 seconds. So, I don't know. Like I said, the game's got its issues, but it's not bad. It's fun. The figure itself, by the way, much better than the actual game, but if you're a Godzilla fan, I'd say play the game, see what you think. If you never played it, it's worth going back and looking at. Again, not a classic, but not terrible. So, that's been my review. Again, I'd say get this figure if you like the video game or if you're familiar with it or you just want a cool piece for your collection. That said, this has been Captain McKay. We'll see you next time.